Every 10 years, the census takers knock on front doors across America to find out who we are and where we're going. The 1920 census told us that for the first time, we were almost equally spread between our great cities and life on the land. Lots of us were living in small towns, and small towns were changing too. The Great War was over, and many doughboys back from France were still adjusting to peace and the new prosperity. For those in farming communities, there were new problems. The Great Plains had been plowed up to raise wheat for the armies fighting the war. But with peace came the evaporation of the market which had made the farmer so prosperous. The lack of demand for wheat and other staple crops caused depression for the farmers. The new prosperity was based more on the sale of automobiles, radios, and electricity than on agriculture. Mechanization had helped the farmer. It made the work easier, but it also meant that fewer hands were needed. The farmers were disenchanted and afraid, and they campaigned without success for federal aid. For hundreds of thousands, the solution would mean leaving a life which had become a thankless occupation. Many would be drawn to the city by the glittering promise of prosperity, for the city was the loom that was weaving the new fabric of society. Much of the prosperity of the decade was produced by the automobile. Millions were made and sold. Car sales stimulated other industries as well, for cars meant gas, and gas meant oil, and rubber, glass, and steel. When we had a good idea, mass production multiplied it by millions. Business was the religion of the 20s. Machinery is the new messiah, Henry Ford told us. Calvin Coolidge agreed. The man who builds a factory builds a temple, Coolidge said, and the man who works there worships there. The new uniform of the decade was the business suit, and for the first time, millions of men bought them, not from the tailor, but right off the rack. Dressing right meant business success, and in the 20s, no professional was more greatly admired than the businessman. Businessmen were builders, doers of great things, men of vision with their eyes on the future. Millions of businessmen joined service clubs like Rotary and Kiwanis. These were men who were quite sure that strength of character could be measured by a handshake. What mattered to many women was the right to vote. The 19th Amendment guaranteed that right and was the law of the land as the 20s began. Though women in some western states had been voting for years, most American women cast their ballots in 1920 for the first time. Women also ran for office. First woman governor was elected in 1924. A few women had unusual occupations, like directing traffic as policewomen in New York City. Though some would become doctors and lawyers, most women who went to work in the 20s worked in laundries, bakeries, or in other blue-collar jobs. If you lived in a city, you might get a job as a telephone operator, a clerk, or a stenographer. Despite the reputation that all women in the 20s were flappers with newfound freedoms, most women had traditional roles, which included grocery shopping. In the 20s, millions of women fed their families with food from the Piggly Wiggly or the A&P. Chain stores were spreading across the country with standard products on their shelves. You could buy the same brand of cornflakes, cookies in Iowa as your Aunt Clara did in New York. There were lots of products to choose from, and manufacturers spent millions on ads that told us which to buy. of ads was irresistible. We bought things that promised to make life easier and more comfortable, and with satisfaction guaranteed. We bought things that showed we were successful and had good taste. In the 20s, we thought it was important to be modern. We saw these ads in magazines, in the pages of Life, Saturday Evening Post, and dozens more that were delivered to our door. We may not have been able to buy everything we saw, but we could dream. The magazines were cheap, and it was from their pages that the growing middle class built its image of itself, an image of prosperity. For most middle-class families, prosperity meant radios, automobiles, and telephones, for these were the things that meant convenience to the modern family. Almost every family had a car, and 3 out of 4 bought their cars on the installment plan. Used cars were sold too. The first car many families bought was second-hand. By the end of the decade, there were 26 million cars and trucks on American roads. If you lived in one of the new suburbs, you might use your car to drive to work or to visit friends on Sunday afternoon. Gasoline was still only 25 cents a gallon. And we used a lot of it, especially in the cities. City streets were crowded as never before. We were fast becoming a nation on wheels.